Hi guys, welcome back. Now we left off at the start of chapter 7 for Witchlings, so we're going to continue on with that. Now, before we begin, as always, we're going to take a deep breath. And begin. Chapter 7, BP Gets Lost. Incendio, Seven intoned the spell for fire and nearly hit the burlap sack she tried to make look like a night beast. She'd enchanted it to move around like a wolf might so that it would be more of a challenge, but it looked more like a half-melted bear, if she were being honest. As part of the impossible task, they'd been given a few weeks off from the Goody Garlic Academy for Magic, so Seven and Thorn were practicing their combat spells at the school's empty toad racing track. They hadn't seen or heard from Valley since the Forbidden Book incident 3 days earlier, and Seven was beginning to worry. Next, Thorn tried and succeeded in hitting the burlap night beast with an ice spell. Nice shot! A tinkling sound came from Seven's pocket, and she took out her phone. But before she could say a word, her mother interjected. Seven, your brother is gone again. We looked in all the usual spots, but can you check for him on your way home? On it, said Seven, before they said their goodbyes and hung up. My brother is missing, she said casually, and Thorn raised her eyebrows in alarm. Oh no, it's okay. He always does this. It's part of his magic manifesting. He can vanish and reappear in random places, and he obviously hasn't learned to control it since he's a baby. I've got to go home now and look for him on my way there. Babies in Ravenskill were all in varying stages of magical manifestation, and therefore chaos. Whenever a new power appeared in them, it was erratic and unstable, as magic tends to be at the start. I'll come with you. Thorn grabbed her rucksack from the frozen grass and slung it onto her back. My house is just past yours anyway. Dope, said Seven, smiling. Dope, mimicked Thorn softly, as if she'd never said the word before. Encantamiento terminado, Seven said, pointing at the burlap night beast. It shriveled like a deflating balloon. She stuffed it into her bag, and they made their way to find Beefy. It was a crisp autumn night, and leaves danced in the air, the threat of a storm whispering in the wind. Seven took the path alongside the cursed forest home, and one her mother had told her to check, with Thorn walking very closely behind her. You're going to make me trip, said Seven, looking over her shoulder. Sorry, it's just, scary here. Thorn caught up, walking next to Seven now. It's cool. There's nothing in these woods that can hurt us while we're in town. The town grand keeps Ravenskill sealed with powerful magic. But even as she said it, Seven knew this was no longer true. There was a monster in the woods, a monster they were meant to defeat. Thorn nodded slowly, not looking very convinced herself. Past the row of giant strange-leaned figs, that's where the cursed forest starts, remember? So long as we don't go past those, we're good. Noted, Thorn squeaked. What's your favorite movie? Seven asked. Might as well try to get to know Thorn as they walked, and maybe it would calm her down so she wasn't walking literally on top of her. Sea Sirens 3, Sirens Strike Back. Have you seen it? Course, best one in the franchise. Solid choice. Mine is Creatures, even though I watched most of it like this. Seven held her slightly splayed hands up to her eyes. Thorn giggled. I already know your favorite books. Witches of Heartbreak Cove. Mine is the same. Who is your favorite witch sister? Seven whistled. Hard one. Everyone says Bianca Nightingale because she's the most popular and pretty, and I do love her, but I have a soft spot for Seraphina. Oh, goats. Seraphina has always been my favorite. Right? She can fight with fire, become invisible. Seven ticked each thing off on her fingers, and her familiar is a unicorn. the girls said at the same time, just as a loud sound pitched through the woods. They whipped around in unison towards the dark forest, where the sound was coming from. Seven and Thorn looked at each other, the big happy smiles on their faces fading. Then Seven heard it clearly. It was a baby crying. "Beefy," choked out Seven before breaking into a run. They followed the sound of Beefy's voice closer and closer as Seven's chest got tighter and tighter. What if he was hurt? What if someone had gotten him? Beefy was not your average baby, of course. Like any baby in Ravenscale, he was born with magic, and he was also incredibly strong. Once, he nearly threw Talus over the sofa while they were playing, and Seven knew to be careful not to leave anything heavy lying around in case he picked it up and threw it at someone in an attempt at catch. But he was still a baby, and there was a night beast on the loose. "Does he normally cry like this?" asked Thorn. "No, and he's never gone into the cursed forest." Seven stopped just at the edge of the forest. Beefy's magic only allowed him to travel places he'd been before, being a baby and all, so why then were his insistent cries coming from deep within the cursed forest? The knot in Seven's stomach grew. He was okay. Beefy had to be okay. She didn't know if she could handle it if he wasn't. "Isn't this the same place we came with Valley to place the jellybean fish pods? The night beast might be here, Seven. We should get an adult," suggested Thorn. "You can go. I need to get my brother," Seven said. She knew Thorn must be afraid. She was too, but she remembered what Valley had said. Night beasts like to snack on babies. She had to go now before she lost her nerve. Seven stepped 1 foot over the line where the cursed forest began, and the night changed around her. The sky, once twinkling with stars, went completely black, so Seven had to squint to see. The gnarled roots of the strangling figs made their way for the two witchlings to cross over into the pitch darkness. Thorn stood next to her, looking scared but determined. "That's weird," whispered Thorn. She pointed up at the tree Valley had climbed. The jelly-bean fish pods sat there, untouched. Seven hoped they were untouched because the night bees hadn't been here and not because they'd already eaten something else. Seven held out her hand and raised her eyebrows at Thorn. Thorn nodded her okay, so Seven took her hand and they walked deeper into the woods, following the sounds of Beefy's wails. Seven felt she might be sick. There was really nothing worse than the thought of her baby brother being hurt and her not being able to do anything about it. They walked deeper into the woods, faster now, the initial hesitation gone as Beefy's cries grew louder, more insistent. Before long, they'd broken into a run, Seven pulling Thorn along. This was deeper than she'd ever been in the cursed forest. They were going much too fast for Seven to see much of anything around them, but every few minutes something slinked out from the dark to watch them, a figure shrouded in moving shadows, something that only appeared in the darkest part of the forest. Finally, a small figure came into view. "Luz," Seven said, snapping her fingers. A small blue light bloomed from her hand, and she could see Beefy, his purple blankie clutched in his chubby fingers, his mouth open wide as he cried in the middle of a clearing. Seven stopped abruptly, relieved, and Thorn panted at her side, hand still clutching Seven's. Not running to him immediately felt to Seven like her insides were being pummeled with a hammer, but she had to be sure he wasn't a shrouded, a shadow creature that lurked in this cursed forest, disguising themselves as one of their favorite tricks. Seven and Thorn were both silent, as if speaking would break the spell of the forest and the shadow figures would descend on them. "You wouldn't happen to have any unveiling dust on you?" Seven whispered, her voice barely audible and much too loud all at once. Thorn shook her head. "I'm going to get him," Seven said. "It's dangerous," Thorn's voice hitched. "What if it's a shrouded, or a trap? Then I'm in a bog. But if it's him, my brother needs me now." Seven launched herself into the center of the circle, grunting loudly as she scooped Beefy into her arms. She let out a sigh of relief. If he were shrouded, His disguise would have fallen away at her touch. But he was beefy. He grabbed onto a chunk of her hair and buried his wet face in her neck. Seven's heart broke into a million pieces. Something screamed behind them, and Seven nearly fell over, fear ripping through her like a violent storm. They all shrieked, and Beefy buried his face deeper into Seven, his tears soaking the neck of her cloak. Thorn was there to catch her, helping her keep balance, and they ran towards the town line as fast as they could. They panted as they ran, the promise of something terrible rushing behind them all the way to the edge of the woods. They passed the barrier separating Ravenskill from the cursed forest, and instantly the pressure around them lifted. The night filled with the comforting sounds of Ravenskill after dark, soft music coming from the jazz club up the road, crickets and frogs singing their nightly lullabies, the faint sound of Ravenskillians talking in taverns, and Ebenor's tea room in the distance. Thorn doubled over, her hands on her knees, while Seven sat beefy on a bench to check for any wounds. He was trying to get a word out, and Seven felt her stomach drop at the thought of his first word being brought on by this horrible night. "He looks okay," she said after inspecting every inch and fold of his skin. Beefy wailed, and Seven shushed him gently, stroking the little tuft of black hair on his head the way Fox and Talus did when putting him down for a nap. He'd been trying to say his first word, probably mama, for weeks. "Do you think your parents could come get us? I'm too freaked out to walk home in the dark," Thorn said, a slight tremble in her voice. Seven put her hand on Thorn's shoulder and squeezed. "I'm sure they can. Why don't you sit here on the bench while we wait?" She called her parents, who said they were on their way. The bench was under a lamppost, flooded in merciful light, and seemed miles and miles away from the cursed forest, though they were only a few toadstools away, if that. A few minutes later, Talus and Fox arrived in the old black buggy they took out sometimes. They rushed over to them, concern etching their faces. "We're okay," Seven assured them. "Beefy seems okay too." "Thorn?" Talus asked, and Thorn just nodded. But she bit her lip at the same time, and tears began spilling from her eyes. "Come," Fox pulled Thorn in, holding her head as she sobbed. Talus checked Seven, much like she checked Beefy, and then picked up the baby, who was still trying to get a word out. "Is he?" Fox hitched an eyebrow as Beefy finally got the word out. His first word, a dark word. A terrible word. Beefy whispered quietly, picking one chubby finger up and pointing it in the direction of the cursed forest. He repeated the word 3 times in his little voice. The hairs on Seven's arms stood up when she realized what he was saying, and Thorn sniffled as she looked at him. "What did he say?" she asked. "He said monstru," Fox said gravely. And everyone in Ravenskill, even baby Beefy now, knew that monstru meant one thing: monster. Chapter 8. The Trouble with Thorn. Seven knew that just because they technically, by witch law, had 3 weeks to solve the impossible task, didn't mean they'd last that long. Their task involved them finding the night beast, but there was nothing to say that the night beast could not find them first. And if what had happened with Beefy was any indication, things weren't looking good for them having much time. Seven had an awful feeling like they were already being hunted. At least they had finally heard back from Valley and had gotten together the first chance they had. "So did the Grand find anything in Beefy's memory?" asked Valley as they trudged through the snow to the library the next day. The Grand and the uncle had gone over to Seven's house the night before to make sure Beefy was okay and to ward the house with protection magic. Seven couldn't help but wonder why a monstru would go through all the trouble of trying to take her brother. He was far from the only fat magical baby in town. So what was so special about Beefy? "Not yet," said Seven. She just saw the woods around him and some freaky-looking shadows, but no monstru. She's still looking, though. As they walked past the road that led to the cursed forest, Seven was reminded of their trap. The jelly bean fish were untouched yesterday, but we should check on them again today. I already did early this morning, Valley said. Staked them out for a good hour, but nothing. Rats, Thorn mumbled, looking down. It's really weird. Night beasts love jelly bean fish. Figured they'd disappear by now. Speaking of disappearance, where have you been the past couple of days? Seven asked. Valley's face went a weird gray color, and she shook her head. I was sick. Seven continued to look at her, suspicious of the answer, but only because she was worried it was something worse. Oh no, you should be more bundled up then. Thorn pulled another hat and a fluffy scarf from her rucksack and flitted around Valley like a fairy, trying to wrap her in the thick green wool. By the time she was done, Valley looked like a scowling, overstuffed burrito, and Seven couldn't help the small laugh that escaped as they confronted the front door of the library. Seven had noticed that in the morning the library door didn't like to be pressured or scolded into opening. Compliments worked best. So did a cheerful voice. The door shivered as if it were about to open, but thought better of it because of the cold. Please open, said Thorn, and with a happy sigh, the door did just that. I guess I can tell you're not just pretending to be nice to it. That's why it opened so easily for you, Valley said, when they were safely inside. You goats pretend? Thorn asked. Valley and Seven shared a giggle. Their first shared giggle in person. Heck had frozen over. There was at least one icicle. The library was Seven's second favorite place in the world after her own bedroom. It had high cathedral ceilings, books lining every wall from edge to edge, and sliding stairs where, on a busy day, librarians could be seen soaring from shelf to shelf. At the center of the library was Miss Dewey's station, adorned with colorful plants, fairy lights, and hidden compartments for snacks. It had a circular desk which Miss Dewey glided around, tapping on the various MAKLs, magical archiving knowledge locators, and helping people find that one book with the blue cover or that one mystery about the lady on the train. Miss Dewey had won the Best Darn Librarian Award in the 12 towns for 3 years running now, which didn't surprise Seven one bit. Seven hoped that when she was older, she could be this good at something. Miss Dewey had called to let them know the Night Beast books were back in the library and she had reserved them for the Witchlings, though unfortunately not the Night Beast archives. They headed right towards her station, where she was busy working. She gave a patron a thumbs up, and a bright blue and pink bird emerged from somewhere behind her MAKL. Almanac, Miss Dewey's familiar assistant, had wings made up of tiny glowing letters and numbers. He flew to the exposed second floor of the library and hovered near one of the books Miss Dewey had probably just looked up, just as he always did. Seven could see several other familiars already at work for the other librarians and patrons. A neon-colored ferret slinked and climbed around the bookshelves and made its way towards the opposite end of the stacks, probably locating a book for another reader. It was a perk of the job, since only librarians got familiars, a long-standing tradition of the 12 towns. There were a few tables with witches from the Frog House Coven already reading or working on homework. In one table, Seven noticed as her stomach sank, with members of House Hyacinth, chatting and looking over spellbooks. Poppy was there too. Seven cleared her throat as they passed. Hi, Poppy. Poppy looked surprised. Her face went red as one of her coven members plopped a giant book in front of their faces, blocking them from Seven's view. That wasn't very nice, Thorn said, but Seven pulled her away. Don't bother, Seven said, feeling so miserable she could cry. I shouldn't have said hi. Hello, girls, Miss Dewey greeted them. Miss Dewey sounded like a black and white movie. Her accent was unlike anyone else's in Ravenskill, and the only way Seven could think to describe it was old-timey. Hey, Miss Dewey, said Seven. I've set something special up for you. Follow me. Miss Dewey walked towards the back of the library with purpose, her favorite yellow scarf fluttering behind her. The witchlings followed, giving one another curious looks but not questioning their favorite librarian. When Moria Dewey said to do something, you did it. At the back of the library, Miss Dewey took them through a discreet wooden door to a room Seven had never seen before. Soft, comfortable reading lights illuminated the room, and two big, comfy sofas sat facing each other, with a coffee table between them. To one side, mugs and a glass carafe filled to the brim with steaming hot cocoa sat next to a bowl of fluffy homemade marshmallows and a giant bag of those long, crispy orange snacks that left your fingers dusty and your throat craving fizzy drinks. On the walls were posters of every toad racing tournament in the past few years, including the upcoming match right here in Ravenskill. At the center sat a shiny crystal bell, and Seven wondered what it was for. Beneath the table sat a cooler, and Seven would bet her entire book collection it was full of their favorite sugary drinks. Fuel for important work, said Miss Dewey. This is so cool. Thorn sank into one of the sofas. You three need to focus. It's perfect. Thanks, Miss D, Seven said. Yeah, thanks. I love Cheezios, said Valley. They are your favorite, according to your mom. And Seven, you'll find your favorite purple fizzy cola in the cooler. Thorn, the hot cocoa is your grandma's special recipe. Miss Dewey pantomimed, hitting a ball out of the park, and the three witchlings cheered. Miss Dewey wasn't just the best darn librarian. She was on a whole other level. If you three need anything, I'll be just outside. I've left all the Night Beast-related books there on the table. Miss Dewey pointed at a pile of heavy-looking books near one of the sofas. But Almanac is on call to find you any books I might have missed. Just ring that little crystal bell on the table and he'll come to you. Valley immediately went over and grabbed one of the Night Beast books and began looking through it. Thanks again, said Thorn, waving to Miss Dewey as she left them in their private research room. This is awesome. I should come to the library more often, said Valley, stretching out on one of the sofas with the book she'd grabbed. Let's hope we don't get toadified then, said Seven. The witchlings sobered up at that. As cool as this room was, as delicious as the snacks looked, this might very well be one of their last meals not involving insects if they didn't stop the Night Beast. That is, if they didn't become monster food themselves. We need to learn more about the Night Beast, Seven-eyed Valley, who had mentioned more than once now how much of a monster expert she was. Somehow, Seven doubted it, since A, she had not taught them much about Night Beast, and B, Valley fell asleep in or never came to class. Well, that's why we're here, to learn more about the Night Beast. Here, Valley passed books to Seven and Thorn, and the three witchlings began to read. After a few minutes, Valley jumped up from the sofa. What? Thorn and Seven asked in unison. Valley looked at them wide-eyed. Listen to this. The Night Beast, the most elusive of the monster cat class, is not without its quirks. Night Beasts are particularly drawn to children, showing the promise of power. The more powerful the witch, the more delicious it is to the monster, Valley spread. Seven shivered, reliving that awful night her brother had gone missing. Beefy was strong for his age, so that explained why the Night Beast would want to take him, but there was still something Seven didn't understand. How did he get there, though? I think my parents would have noticed if a Night Beast broke into his nursery. When I heard Beefy was found in the cursed forest, I started thinking. He could never have gone there on his own, so someone or something must have brought him there. Valley sat back down and shifted through the book on her lap. She found the section she was looking for and read in silence for a moment before looking up. Okay, I think I know how Beefy was taken into the cursed forest. It says here, because they go through cycles of strength and weakness, Night Beasts typically hibernate and gather strength upon their arrival to a new territory. They are very difficult to track during hibernation. The hibernation period can vary from 3 weeks to 6 months. During this hibernation period, they are dependent on a creature known as El Cuco. Cuckoos are not as strong as their leader, but still deadly, Valley continued. They have powerful tracking magic, which aids in their job as hunters. They hunt and gather for the night beast until it gains enough strength to emerge from its cave and attack whenever unlucky town is descended upon. See? If one of the cuckoos took Beefy, underestimating your brother's strength, he could have dispatched it, Valley said. I really doubt my brother, a literal baby, could be a night beast minion. He could if the cuckoo was a smaller, younger one. Look, said Valley, pointing at the book again. The night beast sometimes targets specific prey, and depending on that prey, can choose to send one of their smaller and therefore less valuable to it cuckoos. All cuckoos are smaller than the night beast, but they vary in size, so maybe Beefy appeared somewhere normal, like the edge of the forest, and our night beast took advantage of the situation and sent a smaller cuckoo to take him, but Beefy punched him or something. Or it saw us and realized it was outnumbered, said Seven. Some of the cuckoos are only a bit bigger than we are. Look, Billy turned the book around to show them. At the center of the page was a night beast. It looked like some sort of wolf, if wolves were the size of teenage elephants and had not one, but two snarling heads. Its fur looked slimy instead of soft, and it was a blood red color. Its eyes were completely white. One paw was probably the size of Seven's head, and she shuddered to think what this creature could do with all four of them. Around him stood smaller creatures, skinny and tall, with matted fur stretched over visible bones, and rows of teeth. The cuckoos. There were other animals lined up beside them for scale, and some of the cuckoos were in fact around Valley's height. Thorn dropped her cup of chocolate, and it spilled everywhere. Oh no, she said, dropping down to dab at the mess. Thorn, are you okay? Seven asked, crouching down to help Thorn. How in the goose are we supposed to fight that thing? I have some ideas. Night beasts are the most elusive of the monster class. They have no scent, not traceable by memory spells or potions. Even the most famous monster hunter of all time, Vega Mirabal, couldn't find one back in 1985. Valley had a weird twinkle in her eye. It was the same look Seven got when talking about famous witch reporters or V.V. Evan Mora, the author of Witches of Heartbreak Cove. Instead, the night beast found her, and, well, she ran a finger across her neck, dead. But we've discovered things about it since then, like the kinds of droppings it leaves behind, that they use fallen trees to reinforce their layers. The night beast is hard to find, but it's not impossible. What's probably impossible is fighting it. For us, anyway. If Vega couldn't, then there's not much hope for us, Valley said. If we're going to have a chance, we have to take advantage of its biggest weakness. Seven stopped helping Thorn for a moment and looked up at Valley expectantly. If it's still in its feeding and hibernation state, it won't fight, out of self-preservation. The closer it gets to full strength, the more it will venture out, but it won't fully expose itself until it feels every weakness is leached from its system. That's why it makes the cuckoos fight for it. The night beast is a proud and selfish monster, only worried about its own survival by any means necessary. We have to try to find it before it emerges. Otherwise, our only choice is to figure out the day it's going to appear according to its usual pattern of behavior. It's quite fascinating, really. You obsessed with monsters, Pepperhorn? Seven asked. What tipped you off? Valley asked sarcastically, and Seven flinched. Every time she let her guard down even a little, she remembered that was a colossal mistake. Valley cleared her throat, and her voice changed a bit, became softer. How do you think I know all this stuff? I want to be a monster hunter and keep Ravenskill and all the magic towns safe. Funny. Seven always pictured Valley as the let monsters loose on the town type, not a protector. But if the past few days had taught her anything, it was that she didn't know the people in her life quite as well as she thought she did. Seven glanced at her phone, but nothing new from Poppy. It made her stomach sink, like she was gonna barf. She hadn't done anything wrong. At least, not that she could remember. So why was her best friend in the world treating her like a phantom? Everything felt shaky and unsafe, like she was moments from tumbling from a broom high up in the clouds. So if we want to stop the night beast, said Valley, our best bet is to find it during its weakened state. Seven and Thorn nodded. Valley scrunched her face like she was deep in thought. Problem is, there's not much intel on how to do that, considering that most people who fight them don't make it out alive. So we're toast? Seven asked. That doesn't mean we lie down and let it eat us. There are a lot of really scary monsters, ones nobody thought you could defeat, that ended up being defeated anyway. It's just a matter of finding the right battle plan, Belly said. Belly rolled a big blackboard out in front of them from the other side of the room and wrote Stupendous Spares Battle Plan up top. Thorn smiled. Okay, it's time to learn how to hunt a night beast. The Spares spent the next few hours reading through the books and writing up everything they learned. How night beasts could camouflage themselves in the woods, how their fangs could pierce almost anything, and how they had a love of long, luxurious naps and fat baby witches. They learned night beasts operated in 3 phases. Expedition, to find their next lair with scouting help from cuckoos, hibernation and feeding, and lastly the hunt, when they left their den and attacked a town. I have an idea, Seven raised her hand. Valley rolled her eyes. You don't have to raise your hand. We're not in class. Seven shrugged and put her hand down. If the cuckoos bring them food, can we find one and follow it? Maybe they'll lead us to the night beast. Valley clapped. Yes! You're smarter than you look. If the cuckoos are out hunting for the night beast, they'll leave behind things like hair and droppings. Tracking them could also lead to the night beast. She wrote tracking and then using cuckoos right beneath it on the blackboard. And Seven wasn't sure how to feel at the backhanded compliment. We should also be on the lookout for dead flowers. Night beast presence make it impossible for flowers to thrive near them. Any flowers that should be alive in winter and aren't might be a sign they're near. Valley wrote dead flowers right beneath using cuckoos on the board. Aren't most Ravensgill flowers dead in winter anyway? Asked Thorn. A bit deflated, the Witchlings went silent for a few moments. Seven dove deep into her memories, trying to recall something, anything, she'd read in one of her many Botanica books that might help them now. Something tickled the back of Seven's brain, and she snapped her fingers, took out a notebook from her backpack, and flipped through the pages. Here, I cataloged this plant years ago, but had almost forgotten. The Bay Hebi rose can withstand frigid cold temperatures and survive even the harshest of winters. They're pretty common in the area surrounding the cursed forest too, including Oso Mountain, which also has caves. So kind of perfect. All right, then we start with looking for cuckoos to follow first and keep the flowers in mind, Valley said. Will we be able to get past the cuckoos once we follow them to the den? Asked Seven. There will likely be too many for us to fight at once, so we'll need to figure out a way to hold them off, Valley said. We can use poison foxglove or sleeping tonics if I can manage to make it into an aerosol, said Seven. I also found something in my independent research that might help. Seven whipped out her trusty fox dragon scale notebook and read from her notes. They're called shushrooms. And they almost completely silence your movements and steps. These might help us sneak up to the cuckoos or the night beast. Shushrooms were essential to any spell involving sneaking and quiet, and they grew exclusively along the marshy banks of the boggy Crone River. The key was to ground the shushrooms up and eat one fingernail-sized bite. Any more than that, and they'd be greener than Edgar Allan Toad, Seven explained. Valley wrote that on the board and kept talking. Cuckoos usually, but not always, hunt at night. So we're most likely to find one at night, in the deep woods or along a river. We already know night beasts like jellybean fish, So we'll have to get some more of those. And I don't know, maybe spread them out. Or put them on ourselves like bait, Valley said. Cuckoos will try to gather them for the night beast, so it could work. Seven shivered at the thought of being night beast bait, but it did make sense. Isn't it kind of weird that the traps didn't work if they love jelly bean fish so much? Belly shrugged. Lots of explanations for that. It could have enough food. The closer it becomes to emerging, the bigger their appetite. Could just be a sign it wasn't hungry enough. I hate this, said Thorn. She was worrying the hem of her dress, and Valley looked at her intently. You okay? Valley asked. Thorn looked up, her eyes wet with tears. I tried to fight a night beast once. What? Seven and Valley asked in unison. Thorn nodded as Seven took her hand. Valley sat on the other side, doing the same. I didn't tell you because I was worried it would make you not want to be my friends. Everyone back at home stopped talking to me after it happened. Like I was cursed or something. But the reason we moved is because the night beast tracked me home one night. Valley gasped. There had been rumors that there was a monster on the loose in Boggs Ferry. That's my old town. For a few weeks, but most witches thought they were just rumors. Then one night, I don't know why or how, but it followed me home and it almost took me. My house was warded, but it cut us off before we could run inside, and my twin stepped in front of it. Thorn had a twin? Seven and Valley exchanged looks as Thorn continued. His name was Petal. He was always braver than me. Somehow, he stopped it. I don't remember how, but I remember the night beast was huge, with really sharp teeth, and it had a white stripe down one ear. It was the scariest thing I'd ever seen. I remember I was screaming and trying to pull Petal back into the house, but he wouldn't listen. My brother pushed me out of the way, and I fell behind a rose bush. Then he ran in the opposite direction. The night beast tried to lunge at me and stopped, then ran after my brother and took him into the woods like he was just a little puppy. Grabbed him by the nape of his neck. He looked so helpless. Thorn shook her head and then began to cry again. Oh no, thought Seven. Oh no, oh no. I'm so sorry, Thorn. Seven pulled her into a hug. I'm cursed, said Thorn. You're not cursed. I reject this theory, said Seven. Then why is our tasking night beast? Why did it follow me here? I'm pretty sure the rumors about the night beast being here started before you moved to town, said Valley. Seven nodded. Right. It was not right. Seven seemed to recall the rumors began circulating on the message boards after Thorn had already moved. But now was not the time to say that, not when Thorn was just starting to calm down. You're not alone, Thorn. I'm scared too, Valley admitted. Seven's eyes went wide with shock. As much as I want to hunt a night beast, because, well, I'm me, I had like 20 separate nightmares about being eaten by one, Valley added. I had a dream about a night beast too, but it was super weird. It didn't eat me, but it turned into a baby, and then I rocked it to sleep, Thorn said uncertainly. The witchlings exchanged silent looks, and then all at once burst into laughter. Tears streaming down their faces, laughter, the kind you can only share with people who are just as worried and anxious as you are. We need to be ready. I know how dangerous it is at first hand, said Thorn, wiping her eyes. I'm going to try to be brave. She gave Seven and Valley a smile. I won't let anything happen to you, Thorn, Valley said. Valley had that look on her face, the one she always got before one of her heinous pranks. If I were a night beast, I'd be worried about that hickin' look, Seven blurted out before she could stop herself. Valley let out a loud laugh, throwing herself back on the sofa, and Thorn's small smile turned into a giggle. If it weren't for the voice in the back of her head telling her Valley still didn't like her, Seven would almost think they were becoming friends. Lately, that voice was getting a little less loud. Valley got up and walked to the blackboard. I'll get some more jelly bean fish, she said, writing it on the board. I'll gather the foxglove and sleeping tonic, said Seven. And maybe I can make us pouches to hold everything, said Thorn. Seven realized that they all had the strengths that might come in handy for this impossible task. Maybe the Oracle was right after all. There, said Valley, a satisfied smile on her face. No matter what, there was a bit of good news finally. They had a solid plan. Seven looked over the blackboard Valley had just finished writing on and committed it to memory. They would find the night beast while it was still in its weak state by luring and following cuckoos. Once they found its den, they would use shrooms to sneak up on the night beast, then flood the den with sleeping tonic and dispatch any cuckoos that were awake with foxglove blow darts. They would also keep an eye out for dead Vahabi roses, and in return, the night beast cave, just in case. Seven felt a bit more prepared, a bit more like they knew what they were doing, and she had to admit a big part of that had to do with Valley, even if she still didn't completely trust Valley. And part of her felt she would pull the rug out from under her at any moment. Seven was glad to have Valley on her team. It was way better than having Valley against her. Seven... Calm down, Ismir. Seven closed her notebook and slapped it on the table with a thump. Okay, we've got to get home and rest. We'll start tomorrow. I think we've researched and prepared about as much as any witch could. Agreed, said Thorn. Outside the library, their respective parents waited to drive them home. After the scare with Beefy the other night, they were all being extra careful. The three witchlings stood outside the entrance awkwardly. It felt like the end of something, or maybe the beginning. Are you goats as nervous about all this as I am? Asked Thorn. Yes, I am, and I'm not sure how I'm going to sleep without dreaming of baby night beast, Valley said. Thorn giggled at that. I think it's normal to be nervous. Seven's next words came out slowly. But still, for their coven's sake, she said, we're going to prove every ugly butt-toad in this town wrong. Seven tried her very best to sound brave, but she did not feel brave. She felt doomed. Thorn beamed, and Valley gave her a small nod. See you tomorrow, nerds, said Valley, getting into her family's fancy black car. Bye, said Thorn, hopping onto the back of her mother's waiting motorcycle. See ya, said Seven, wanting nothing more than to make tonight last just a little bit longer, because tomorrow night they would start for realsies to hunt the night beast. That is the end of chapter 8, and I will begin at chapter 9 in the next episode.